Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
From the fun and energetic atmosphere that is the Gallery Bar Booking Games at beautiful Ocean Casino Resort, it's the JAKIB Media pregame show ahead of the Eagles and Giants kicking off Week 14 in the NFL. Welcome in Marc Farzetta along with you, as well as Derek Gunn, and of course Eagles Hall of Famer Mr. Seth Joyner. A lot of conversation to go into this game, a lot of storylines, especially when it surrounds Saquon Barkley. Also the last time Jalen Hurts went into the Meadowlands, and the Eagles trying to lock up a playoff berth today with a win over the Giants. But first and foremost, the number one issue that people are going to be having today, if he plays, is Saquon Barkley and whether or not the Eagles are going to be able to contain the all-pro running back. So, Gunnar, I'll ask you, as our veteran reporter extraordinaire, what have you heard about Saquon Barkley?
The last report was he was 50-50. Obviously, they're going to test him thoroughly before this game because he has that neck stinger. And as Seth will tell you, man, you know, it's like a sprain. That thing feels good, and all of a sudden you take the wrong hit, and you're debilitated. Now, it's imperative that the Giants have Saquon because the offense runs through him. There's no question about that. When you look at how they've struggled over the last 5 games, going 1-3-1, and Saquon has not had a 100-yard rushing game since the Houston game 4 games ago. Obviously, without him, they're dead in the water. So they're going to do everything they can to get him on the field. Saquon wants to play in this game because it's a huge divisional game, not just for them to win the game, but for them, more importantly, to stay in that playoff race.
Seth, when you look at this team, are they as one-dimensional as we expect with a guy like Saquon Barkley being the absolute focal point of their offense?
Well, they're one-dimensional from the standpoint, you know, that he is a part of what makes the offense go. His success early in the year made Daniel Jones's job just a little bit easier. But if they don't have him today, you know, I don't see any way that the Eagles just run away with this thing. You know, Saquon was full strength, 100% healthy, and looking like the Saquon when he first came in the league. This injury sets him back, and in the fact of him being set back, it sets this offense back dramatically because when you look at the tight end position, the wide receiver position, there's not a whole lot of production there. I think Darius Slayton has got like 33 receptions in 13 games for like 566 yards and two touchdowns. That's not a whole lot of production. So that goes to show you just how big of a part of this offense Saquon Barkley really is.
All right, so before we start breaking down the Eagles, one more thing to touch on when it comes to this New York Giants football team, and that is regarding Saquon Barkley and what they've been able to do around him so far this season. First up, Brian Daboll comes in, takes over the team. There's a whole new atmosphere. Saquon Barkley is in the locker room talking about how he loves Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll comes in, starts rapping Biggie in the locker room, wins over a lot of players with his personality, and the next thing you know, this Giants team is winning, and they're winning. They're 7-2 all of a sudden, and then over the last 5 weeks of the season, not so good, including a tie just last week to the Washington Commanders. So how did the Giants, Seth, start out so hot at 7-2, and over the last 5 games, their focal point, their number one guy, Saquon Barkley, just averaging 2.8 yards per carry. Why have they hit that wall?
Well, listen, they started off hot, and they started off like most teams start off in the NFL. You know, you got a new head coach, a new GM, a whole new mantra. They come out in week 1, and you know Brian Daboll goes for 2 in a really tight game that just shifts the whole dynamic, you know, of what they've been and what they thought they could be really, really early in the season. And they began to believe that they could win. And the Eagles won. The Giants won a lot of tight games, a lot of close games early in the season. But But I think they've kind of come back to earth a little bit the last couple of weeks, and I don't think that it's really all just Saquon. It is amazing when you look at this Giants team statistically and you begin to see the anomalies. I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, they rank probably number 1 in blitzing, yet they only have 9 sacks. I mean, what the heck is that? I mean, how do you bring that much pressure? And I get it. The sacks aren't always just about, the pressures, I should say, aren't always just about the sacks. You're trying to affect the quarterback. You're trying to speed up his clock. And maybe some of that stuff worked earlier, but for them to only have 9 sacks through 13 games, I mean, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And when you look at them statistically, there's a lot of these anomalies that kind of point that, they've been doing it with smoke and mirrors, the first 6-7 games of the season, and now they've kind of come back to earth a little bit.
Yeah, 41% is their blitz rate on passing downs, and that is number 1 in the NFL, ranked 20th, though, and actually getting to the quarterback for that sack. Why the change there, Gunner?
Well, you know what? Injuries have really affected this team. Adoree Jackson is out. Your number 1 cornerback is Fabian Moreau. Okay, that's a problem right there. You look up and down this team. They started out the season nicked up at the defensive end position. The 2 young guys that they thought were going to give them what they needed off the edge have been inconsistent. You look at what has happened to them along the way. The offensive line has been in flux. They haven't had the same starting offensive line combination in quite some time. The receiving core has been suspect. Kenny Golladay has basically been the modern-day Jesse James. He's been stealing money to the point where they don't even care if he gets on the field or not at this point. As weird as that sounds, because he's given them basically nothing. And as Seth said, Darius Slayton, 33 catches, 563 yards, yet your leading pass catcher is the guy who's 50-50 today, Saquon Barkley, who has 40 receptions. So this is a team that has been hanging on by a shoestring, a thread, and super glue to get to this point. Now maybe the laws of averages are catching up to them. But I'm going to touch on something that Seth mentioned a moment ago about them going for it the first game of the season. When you're a new head coach and you're trying to win over your players, and players look at you a little different, okay, I want to see what he's about. He comes out of the gate, he goes to the sideline and asks his players, should we go for it? He incorporates them in a decision. Most coaches just make the decision, right, and you live with it. Right off the bat, he incorporates the players. The players saying unison, yeah, let's go for it. What do we have to lose? They win the game 21-20. From that point on, he was their man. Mm-hmm. He believed that he was like the Pied Piper. They were going to follow him anywhere.
Ultimate sign of a vote of confidence right there from the head coach. You might be noticing a new decoration here on our desk here at the pregame set. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, the Fancy Brigade finale, New Year's night on 6abc.com. We want to make sure that you guys check that out. And we have, I don't know if we're going to crack these open now or maybe in a little bit.
Are they Christmas gifts to us?
I mean, if we walk away with them, they're Christmas gifts. I don't know if they're intentional, but Mummers Row Philly Tea. Make sure you guys check that out as well. Fancy Brigade finale, New Year's night on 6abc.com, where some of you are viewing this fine program right now. The last time, ladies and gentlemen, that Jalen Hurts walked into the Meadowlands, he suffered a tough loss at the hands of these New York Giants. Those numbers on the day, 14-31. For 129 yards and 3 interceptions. And he was also contained in the run game as well. Very tough loss. Some of the worst numbers of Jalen Hurts' career. Completion percentage-wise, the second worst game of his career. What a difference a year makes for Jalen Hurts. We're all very much aware of the steps that he has taken to increase his value to this team and also become a much better quarterback to this team. Is there any revenge factor? Now, the Eagles were able to beat them in their last meeting last year, and that was in Philadelphia. Mike Glennon started that game for the New York Giants, so a much different tune there. When you look at a guy like Jalen Hurts, so going back into the Meadowlands, is there any sense of exercising the demons from a year ago?
No.
That's all distance in the back. It's become a talking point this year.
Yeah, but
okay.
you don't.
Or this week.
You don't. The best thing that Jalen Hurts can do is leave the past in the past. He's a completely different quarterback. He's mature a year ahead, if you will. He's got his team at 11-1. Why would you even think about what happened last year, the disaster that happened last year? You don't even want to bring that into your focus, because what you focus on and what you give your attention to is what you bring about. You don't want to bring about another performance like that. You want to think about, the positivity. Close your eyes and kind of, focus on what you want to see happen, today. Visualize the game that you want to play today, not the game that you played, last year. So I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I think people it's a great talking point, and we in the media got to figure out and find, these hot topics, to make it seem like, we got some real substance and some real news. But then again, I'll go back to it again. Even if he thought about it up to game time, the first time somebody's tried to hit him in the mouth, and do you think he's going to be in the huddle or over center or on the sideline looking at his tablet thinking about, oh, last year I did this, I want revenge? No, man. No way. No way. His mind is focused on one thing, and that's going to New York and beating New York, and everything else is academic.
One of the things I did find interesting was his head coach bringing it up during his press conference earlier in the week, saying one of his favorite pictures at the NovaCare complex right now is Jalen Hurts with his hands on his knees and Jordan Mailata with his hand on his back. And basically Mailata said and explained that photo, saying this was not on just Jalen Hurts. This was on all of us not being able to protect Jalen Hurts, not being able to give enough running space for our running backs, not being able to open up passing lanes for our quarterback. And he said that from that point on, things have very much changed for Jalen Hurts, as we have seen right now.
I don't like it, D-Gun.
You don't like it one bit?
I just don't like it, man. I mean, it's called the pass for a reason. There's nothing back there.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Nothing back there that can benefit you today. So why live there? Why even bring it up?
You know what? I agree with you 100%, Seth, but in my travels and talking to players like to reflect on the negative past to motivate them for the immediate present and the future. Now, Jalen Hurts, we agree in unison, is mature far beyond his 24 years of age. Nothing rattles this young man, no situation. He's had this game circled on his calendar for quite some time because that was statistically his worst game as a professional as he evolved as a first-year quarterback in the National Football League. He's smart enough to know that you can't use the word revenge going into a game like that because that's when it comes back to bite you in the butt, when you try to do too much. Stay within the game of what got you to this point that has made you the dynamic offensive weapon that you have been at this point. Do not let anything take you out of your focus of what the bigger task at hand is. Number one, win the football game. Number two, if we win the football game, we clinch a playoff spot. Number three, we win this game, we get that much step closer to securing that number one seed. That's all he cares about right now. But he's looked at the numbers, he's heard the conversation, he's answered the questions. So it's still fresh in his mind. But he's mature enough at this point to understand, like Seth said, what happened last year has no basis for what's going to happen today.
Absolutely, and he is a much different quarterback than what we saw a year ago. On top of this, I want to know, fellas, if the revenge tour is going to continue with great success for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, Darius Slay was able to go into Detroit. They beat the Lions in that game. Point one right there for Darius Slay. A.J. Brown, most recently, takes on the Tennessee Titans. He goes off and has himself one hell of a football game. Well, now James Bradberry, and I thought it was interesting, Gunnar, when you said earlier about Moreau being their number one cornerback. Their number one cornerback, unfortunately for them, is now on the Philadelphia Eagles in James Bradberry. Does the revenge tour continue? Will we see a great game today from James Bradberry?
No. there's no revenge factor here.
No revenge?
No revenge.
All right.
Bradberry understood the situation. The Giants were in cap hell. And unfortunately, as much as they wanted to keep him, they had to let him go. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. We see it across the National Football League. And to be honest with you, you don't think Bradberry was happy to be out of that mess from last year? There's no revenge. He might send them a bouquet of flowers today for letting him go and allowing him to get in the situation he's in now.
Thank you. I'm playing next to Darius Slay now.
Yes,
this is so much
absolutely.
better. Slay. Just Slay. So no revenge tour today, unfortunately. Well, whatever gives them a little bit of an edge, I guess. But one of the things I've been really, very much blown away with this year is you're talking about not just your cornerbacks being two of the best in the NFL. You're also talking about your running game being tops in the NFL, one of the best in the NFL when you get these guys going. One of the guys that is mainly responsible for that, other than Jalen Hurts, is your running back, of course, and what Miles Sanders has been able to bring to the table this year. Having a career year, well on his way to setting a new personal best, has already set it, but for first 1,000-yard season on the precipice of doing that for a guy like Miles Sanders. Why has he and how has he had so much success this season right now, Seth?
He's in his contract year.
Thank
What
you.
do you think?
Thank you.
When it's money time, guys find a way to get healthy, to perform better, to train better in the offseason, all the above. I'm not going to say that that's the only thing, but that's the predominant thing, in my mind. He understands that he is basically playing for a new contract, potentially, being shipped off from here, because if he goes through if he has another injury and he goes through another subpar year here, I can promise you Howard's going to use, some of that draft capital to go and draft, another running back coming out this year. Wouldn't surprise me one bit to see that happen anyway. But listen, when it's your contract, it's time for you to get your bag. It's time for you to get your money. These guys, everything intensifies. I mean, he came in, in the training camp talking crazy. I got a whole new attitude. And, well, where the hell was that attitude the previous 2 years? This is the thing I don't understand about the whole get your bag type deal. Because if you're not playing like that and that's not your mindset all the time, even when you get the bag, and this is what these guys don't understand, when you get paid, now the pressure to perform elevates even higher, because you're in the top 5% of salary guys on your roster. And if you're not performing, if they re-sign him and he comes back next year, he better, either meet or exceed what he did this year. You want to know why? Because he's got 1 or 2 years before they ask him to take a pay cut, or before they say, he's washed up, as a running back, because, by the time you get to like 28, 29, the first thing they start saying is, you got too much tread on the tires. So they start looking, for a new Michelin, if you will. But what these guys don't realize is that pressure is just insurmountable, because they're going to either cut you or they're going to ask you to take a pay cut if you don't continue to perform. So your mindset should always be the same every single year. Now, you can't do anything about injuries. Injuries are what they are. But the way you prepare, your attitude about the game, the effort that you give, all of those things must stay and be consistent as possible.
I guarantee you, Miles and his representation have been talking all season long about what his value is on the potential open market. Mm-hmm. He's in a tricky situation, because even if he has a 1,000-yard season, he's not going to be paid what Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, those type of backs are being paid. So what is his value? What are the Eagles willing to pay him? Do you see the Eagles paying him $8 million a year? Considering how many other players they have to focus on, you have a quarterback to focus on. Do you want Kazir White back? Do you want Bradbury back? Do you want C.J. Gardner-Johnson back? You got a lot of guys you got to focus on. And so for Miles, and I hate to say this because we talk about this all the time, running backs have become a dime a dozen across the National Football League. I think it's the most disrespected position in all of football right now, the running back position. And there's a vast difference between those who have, those who get what they can, and those who don't. Miles Sanders is in that category of get what you can while you can. This might be the only decent contract he gets for his career when you think about it. If he's in his mid-20s now and he signs a 4-year contract with somebody, by the time he's 30, what do you consider that as 30 years old? Over the hill as a running back, right?
Yeah.
Then you're trying to hang on and get what you can. So, people talk about, well, do you think Miles will be back as a Philadelphia Eagle? From a business perspective, if I'm Miles Sanders in his representation, I'm looking at everything that's out there possibly for me. The Eagles are not going to use a franchise tag on a Miles Sanders, okay? So that means he's going to have leeway to listen to a lot of potential offers. As much as he might want to stay in Philadelphia, Seth, and I think you will agree with this, you got to get it while you can, plain and simple.
Well, listen, everything points towards that. As a player, you go through these phases. You go through the phase of trying to prove that you belong, to getting a contract that's commensurate with where you rank among players at your position, to when you supersede that, trying to get paid, and then ultimately, you're vying for, you want to get an opportunity to go to the big dance before it's all said and done. And with Miles, with running backs, it's sped up that, even that much more. So, Deacon, you're right. I mean, I don't know what the market is, what the top running backs are getting. I have no idea. But, Miles is going to be, probably middle of the road.
Right.
As far as that's concerned. And if he can't get it here and he gets it somewhere else, it's not going to be a long-term deal.
No.
It's going to be 2 or 3 years at the most, and he better perform. And he's got to get to a place where he's got to perform consistently like he's performing now all the time. Because if he has one off year, he's over the hill. He's on the decline. It's nonsensical. because I believe that the running back position still is one of the most important positions. Yeah, you can bring another guy in and hand it off and he can have success. But the problem is, when you have generational guys like a Saquon, you have generational guys like a Derrick Henry, when those guys are right, those are major difference makers. And to Miles, to his non-benefit, the Eagles just haven't given him enough opportunities, in my opinion, to really show what he could truly be. Now, I don't know whether that's because of the injuries or what it is, but when you have a running back that you won't feed him the ball any more than 15, 16 times a game in the running game, how can he ever, really prove to you what his true value is? And maybe he'll go somewhere else and someone will give it to him 20, 25 times a game, and he'll just flourish.
Do you think Miles Sanders is a 25, 27 carry back on a regular basis? Because I don't.
I think when he's in shape the way he is now, because I promise you, he did everything that he had to do to get himself prepared for 17 games and to stay as healthy as he could for 17 games. Okay, if he's in tip-top shape, absolutely, he's a 20 to 25. Listen, some of his best games. You go back to
Jacksonville game.
Jacksonville and
carries.
and the 21 carries a couple of weeks ago on the big run explosion when the Eagles rushed for 363 yards. He was over 20 carries in both of those games. So that proves to you, and every single time where they've given it to him like that, I think there's maybe been one or two more games since he's been an Eagle where they actually gave him the ball 20-plus times. He's produced.
But I don't know if his body type is consistent enough to carry the ball 25, 27
if he can be
times a game.
the bell cow back.
Yes, because he's shown in the past, the biggest negative against him in the past was he couldn't sustain it. Injuries took their toll. Now, this year, all of a sudden, how interesting it is. As you said, it's a contract year. He can stay healthy. I think the fact his injury history is going to weigh against him, but this 1,000-yard season he's on the cusp of is going to help him. So anybody out there looking at him, it's hard to figure out what his value is to that organization.
Especially here in Philly, that is going to be tight on the money. And
Absolutely.
We can always talk about, what a guy's past history was, okay? But there is a such thing as what his current history is. Maybe he just wasn't training properly the way that he needed to train leading up to this year. Maybe he found, the right way to do it, the right mixture of running and supplements and diet and weightlifting and all of those things to get him to a place where now he's kind of grown up in the game and he knows what to do. You just never know. You never know where these guys are at. I just don't want Miles to be one of those guys that we throw away and he goes somewhere else and turns into a perennial, 1,000-yard rusher, 15 touchdowns, 10 to 15 touchdowns a game, and we're sitting here languishing with some young guy that's still trying to figure out how to be a professional running back. And we had it.
But Seth, as you know, when you're a negotiator and you're sitting on the side of the table with the money, you're looking at all the negatives as well as the positives to keep the numbers down. You know what I'm saying?
I get you.
And I think that's going to happen in this case. He's going to be paid well, but I guarantee you, whoever he talks to, your history shows that in your whole career, you've only had one complete season.
That's why you got to have an agent like mine. my agent would tell him, damn history. Look at what he did the last 2 years. Okay, so everybody, you don't play this game without being injured. That's just a fact.
Yep.
Okay,
absolutely.
So let's look at if this is a what have you done for me lately league. Let's look at what he's done for you lately, not what he did way back when.
We're going to peel back the curtain for just a second here. We do have a giveaway we want to take part with you guys for the Saints game that we'll tell you about a little bit later in the show. But right now, we're going to bring in John McMullen from MetLife Stadium to talk all things Eagles and Giants. Oh, no evil beanie this week for John McMullen. No evil beanie this time around.
I could have used it, but you were so upset by it last week. I didn't want to go that direction.
Understood, my friend. Understood. John, there's been a lot of talk, as you would assume, about Saquon Barkley. What's the latest? Will he be playing for the New York Giants today?
They claim it's 50-50. He's undergoing MRIs. Boy, that sounds bad to me. So when you're on game day, I'm leaning towards him not playing. Obviously, we'll get official word at 11:30. And obviously that would be a devastating blow for the New York Giants, who with Saquon Barkley, lack explosive players on offense. So that's the biggest pregame story, and it's trending in a negative direction for the Giants.
Hey, John, we talked about this earlier in the show. I don't know if you were listening in or not, but we honed in on Jalen Hurts, and we talked about how last year the Meadowlands was his worst game of the season, and people like to use the word revenge. Now, you are there every day at practice. You listen to him at the podium. How do you think Jalen handles this game today? I mean, does he even think about last year, considering what he's been able to do this year leading up to this point?
I think he thinks about it. I think he realizes, look, that was his worst game as a starting quarterback in the NFL, pretty much. You can go back to his rookie season, but I think if you kind of throw that out, once he was named the starter, that was clearly his worst game. Threw 3 interceptions, which is very uncharacteristic. Under 50% completion percentage. I think it was 129 yards. So he realizes it was a poor performance. But, Jalen has said all week, teachable moments can come from good games, bad games. He looks at every game and tries to move forward.
Right.
And he called himself emotionless, which I thought, is as close to an apt description of Jalen Hurts as there is. He really is even keeled. That's not an act. So I don't think he puts much more on that performance other than he understands it was a poor one. He learned from it. He'll try to erase it from the memory banks today, and he should. The Eagles are a better team. He's a better player. I think people forget that from last year. And, oh, by the way, as poorly as he played in that game, he still had the Eagles in a position to win if Jalen Reagor can pull down a couple throws late. And that kind of defines Jalen Hurts. Even when he doesn't have his good stuff, to use a baseball analogy, great pitchers. The really great pitchers, when they don't have their great stuff, they find a way to power through. They find a way to get outs. Jalen Hurts finds ways to get first downs, points. And even in his worst game, he had the team in a position to win. I think that kind of defines Jalen Hurts as a player.
John, what kind of problem does Wink Martindale present for Shane Steichen and Jalen Hurts today? We know that he loves to blitz. He loves to bring pressure. He is masterful at creating chaos and making it seem like you're getting one thing from one side when you're getting something from another. The Eagles haven't seen this, or they're not going to have seen this type of blitz pressure since week 1 when Aaron Glenn came at him, with everything but the kitchen sink. I personally believe it's going to be a passing challenge for them today, somewhat based upon the fact that Wink Martindale is just not going to sit back, and allow Jalen Hurts to just operate from the pocket. He's got to affect him with pressure.
Yeah, this is it's going to be interesting for that reason, Seth. Nobody blitzes as much as Wink Martindale, right? So, by far the first in the league, over 40, depending what service you lose, 40 to 44% they blitz. Nobody plays more man coverage. Nobody plays more single high. It's rare in today's NFL to play the way Wink Martindale plays at defense. So when you don't see it, it becomes a little bit of a curveball. Bottom line is, though, the Giants haven't generated the plays you think of with the blitz. They don't get a lot of sacks. They don't get a lot of interceptions. So they haven't generated these big plays. Where Wink has kind of shown up is situational football. They're 23rd in defense, but they're top 5 in third down defense. 6th, I think, in third down. They're 5th in red zone defense. So he brings out the inventive blitzes in big situations. That, to me, is where you look at. And then they have Azeez Ojulari back. So they've been banged up. They're still banged up. They have a ton of injuries on both sides of football. But what they do have is Ojulari back to team with Kayvon Thibodeau. So they have these 2 athletic edge rushers. We'll see if that hurts the Eagles. The good news for the Eagles is, you want to play man coverage against Jalen Hurts? Well, you better get home. Because if those corners got their backs turned, you might see a 100-yard rushing performance. Also, the wide receivers, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith against backup cornerbacks because Adoree Jackson's not playing. Injuries again. Xavier McKinney, their best safety, not playing, is out. Those one-on-one matchups really, really advantage Eagles. So kind of pick your poison as it usually is for Wink Martindale, like everybody else, when you're facing the Eagles offense.
John, this team started out, the New York Giants started out this season, along with their new head coach, along with their new coaching staff, red hot. I mean, they had gone 7-2 to start things off. Now they're 7-4-1. They've only won once in the last 5 weeks. They did have their bye week in the midst there. You mentioned the injuries. Is that the key as to why they haven't had that much sustained success as a team like the Cowboys or, of course, the Eagles in the division, with Washington now coming up the rear as well with the tie they had against them? Why has the New York Giants struggled so much over the last 5 weeks?
Well, a little bit's just market correction. They're not as talented as the Eagles or the Cowboys and even Washington. And this is the least talented team in the NFC East. The Giants kind of, signaled in the offseason, look, this is a rebuilding year. But Brian Daboll, give credit to our old friend Mike Kapka, used to be here. And Wink Martindale, we just talked about. These guys have done a tremendous job overachieving. But they started 6-1, 7-2, as well as you mentioned, Mike. They weren't that good. I mean, they were winning games, very small path, very small margin of error, and they were finding ways to win football games. Give them credit for it, but you also knew that market correction was kind of coming. It's come over the past month. Pro Football Focus grades teams, individual teams, in 13 different categories. Just watching the film, they have the Giants graded as number 30 of 32 teams. So in a lot of ways, it's amazing, and it's a tribute to Brian Daboll that they have this record at 7-4-1.
Hey, John, we always talk about wanting to see a balanced offense, but when you look at this Giants defense, it is a porous defense against the run. Do you expect this to be a run-heavy game from the Birds, similar to what they put on Green Bay a few weeks ago?
I'm going to go Shane Steichen on you, D-Gun, and say I'll let you know about halfway through the first quarter. and that's because Shane really does. He doesn't come into a game with, okay, I'm doing this. He was amazed against Green Bay when the Eagles started having some success, some rushing success, that they didn't do anything to stop it. He said, all right, we're just going to keep doing it. So, a lot of it is dependent on what we just talked about. What is Wink Martindale trying to take away? And he'll go in the other direction. I mean, it's a tremendous luxury to have. But if you're asking me, my guess, yeah, they're not going to have Leonard Williams. They're not good stopping the run when they do have Leonard Williams, who's probably their best player along with Dexter Lawrence up front. They can run the football against this team. The back seven, the linebackers. So if we're talking about which way the Eagles going to go, I always say they're not a run-first offense, not a pass-first offense. They're a Jalen Hurts first offense. I think it's going to be more run-heavy this week than pass-it.
John, I'm going to stay right there because, the last 2 weeks, the Eagles faced the Green Bay Packers. They were one of the worst run-stopping defenses in the league. They racked up 363 yards. They come in, they face the Tennessee Titans. The Titans were ranked 31st in pass defense. They racked up 380 yards, throwing the ball. When you look at this Giants defense, they are ranked 26th against the run.
Yeah.
They're giving up 141 yards a game, and they're 18th against the pass, giving up 218 yards a game. It seems like the Eagles can get just about anything that they want in any phase of the game. Do you see a more balanced attack, or do you see them going one way or the other here?
Well, you're probably right. They can probably do both. So, balance might be the way to go today. I mean, without Leonard Williams, without Adoree Jackson, without Xavier McKinney, these are, the Giants' best players, and they're not going to be playing. So among their best players, Dexter Lawrence, as I said, is they're the best player on the Giants. But the vast majority, they have so many injuries on the defensive side of the football. They're so up against it in the back seven, particularly. It's going to be difficult for them to stop the running game. It's going to be difficult for them to stop the passing game. When you talk about this game in general, and we look at this team and say, could this be another Washington game? It's on the road. Crazy things happen in the division. The Giants can't beat the Eagles. Only the Eagles can beat the Eagles today. The only way they lose this game, turnovers, unforced errors, the talent level, this might be the greatest talent disparity of the year between the Eagles and the opponent.
Very true. And, John, I do want to get this in from Mike Garofalo. It does look like, and he just had a conversation with Brian Dable and said that Brian Dable said Saquon Barkley will be playing in today's game. So it's a matter of how much, though, at this point. He was 50-50 going into today, and now just got the blessing that he will be active today. So
maybe it was a little competitive advantage jockeying, but when you hear neck injury, when you hear MRIs,
that's right.
On the day of the game, and that's your best player, I would err on the side of caution, but there's a little bit of desperation. I mean, this team hasn't made the playoffs in a long time, and they're in a free fall, and they got to find a way to stop it. And if they don't have Saquon Barkley, it becomes even more difficult. So Matt Breida's the backup. He's okay. But I'm a little bit surprised by that, to be honest.
As am I. As you pointed out earlier, I thought it was a great point. You're talking about MRIs. That's never a good sign. John, before we let you go, what is your prediction today for Eagles-Giants?
I have the Eagles winning pretty easily, 31-18. I don't see how the Giants can keep up with this team. I talked about the talent disparity. Houston was probably worse, so I shouldn't say the worst, but among the worst talent disparities coming in. Now, partially that has to do with the injury situation, but it is what it is, and the Giants are really banged up right now.
Certainly. John McMullen, thanks for checking in from MetLife Stadium. Always great catching up with you, our NFL insider for JAKIB Media. John, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. John McMullen joining us right there from the Meadowlands. We'll dissect Saquon Barkley coming up in just a second, him being up and active for this game today. We'll be back with the JAKIB Media pregame show in a few.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Android TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
The big story and action.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
We all know that taxes are just part of life. It's true during our working years, but also in retirement. But what you might not know is up to 85% of your Social Security benefits might be taxed. Our team at Thrive Financial has helped retire thousands of people across the Delaware Valley by asking questions they never knew they needed to ask, including how their Social Security benefits might be taxed. It's time to be proactive on taxes. Get your Thrive Retirement Tax Playbook today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Go for the beers, go for the cheers, go for the hit and the hits, go for the scene, go for the screens, go for the gallery, go for the win, go to Ocean.
Welcome to Pond Lehocky. We've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lehocky a call.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the Birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Number 1, Jeff D'Ambrosio. Destination Downingtown is rolling back prices for December to remember. For a limited time, you can own, not lease, brand new 2023 Jeep Wranglers for only $30,995 or $339 per month. New Rams starting at only $30,995 or new Ram 1500 Bighorn Crew Cabs $189 per month. Zero down can deliver. Get the price you want, the selection you need, and the VIP treatment you deserve. Jeff D'Ambrosio, Destination Downingtown, Big Finish Sales Event.
Welcome back to the JAKIB Media Pregame Show. Marc Farzetta, Seth Joyner, Derek Gunn. Don't forget about the amazing Fancy Brigade finale, New Year's night, 6abc.com and your Mummers Row Philly tea. Treat yourself every once in a while. We were talking a lot about Miles Sanders. We're talking a lot about the run game, but now we know that Saquon Barkley will be active today. How much he'll be used is yet to be seen in this football game. But one thing I think you got to give this defense for over their first two meetings against Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Gannon's defense has done a great job against him. He has averaged just 36 yards per game in the two meetings last year against the Eagles. Why have they had that success? And now that you got to face him stats today, do you expect that same type of success against that running back?
Well, they've had that success because the Giants' offensive line the last couple of years has just been awful. They played better this year, but when you look at the intensity, and I get it, they went into last week's game understanding who Derrick Henry really is and understanding why they had to get him stopped. But I expect for this game to be along the same lines. Now, I don't know how healthy Saquon is, to Derek's point. How much he's actually going to play. Sometimes you got coaches in their mind game masters. If you deactivate him, the message that it sends to the team is we ain't got a damn chance in hell. You understand what I'm saying? Even if he's active and he doesn't play that much, the psychological effect of having him up rather than down for the team is monumental. So maybe that's what Brian Daboll, that's the game that he's playing. But when you talk about MRIs on game day and, all of this other stuff, as an organization, I think it's foolish to even risk his situation. But the Eagles got to go in with the mindset. I know they haven't been playing into it all week long anyway. Oh, yeah, he might not play. No. Oh, Derrick Henry might not have played last week. No, he's going to play. Let's approach it from that standpoint, and our mindset has to be the same. We need to get to him and get to him quick. We need to load the box and take away the running game and force Daniel Jones to beat us with his legs and force Daniel Jones to beat us with his arm. And I want to see the Eagles' defense, if they do force that scenario, which they should, be a little more disciplined in their rush lanes, because Daniel Jones is one of the few quarterbacks that they'll face this year that can really, really, really hurt them once he gets out of the pocket.
Certainly. Do you see this as being a focal point, trying to stop that running attack, and will they have that same success?
I'm more worried about Daniel Jones running the football than I am Saquon, as crazy as that sounds. I think that, when you look at Saquon Barkley, he is the focal point of the offense, plain and simple. Now, Brian Daboll has done a much better job in terms of grooming Daniel Jones to be a more efficient quarterback, i.e. 66 completion percentage, only 11 touchdowns, but more importantly, he's only thrown 4 interceptions this year.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, they're going to try to take Saquon out of the game. So what do you have left? You worried about Darius Slayton? You worried about the tight end Bellinger, who's been up and down with the injuries? It comes to Daniel Jones, and as we saw last year, Daniel Jones killed him in a running game last year. Now, you can run up and down the field you want and trip on the turf monster inside the 20 if you want, but I'm not worried about Daniel Jones beating the Eagles. I'm worried about Daniel Jones consistently giving the Giants decent field position against this defense. That's my concern.
I thought John made a great point. I think this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, disparity when it comes to talents from one team to another, with the Eagles taking on this Giants team. And that might give some people a sense of overconfidence, but when you really think about it and you try to be objective about it, the Eagles, on paper, blow this team out of the water. But when you look at the Giants right now, they could have those games where the Eagles just can't do anything right, similar to the Commanders game and the only game that the Eagles lost this season. You could certainly look at a lot of instances in that game where the Eagles turn the football over. The Eagles are so good this year that I do believe when you look at the rest of their schedule, sure, you look at the Dallas Cowboys, the team that will give them a game, no doubt about that. But the number one opponent to the Eagles right now, the number one threat to the Eagles right now, is the Eagles. They give away that football, and they're facing a team today that loves to punch the football out. They've recovered the most fumbles so far in the NFL this season. So they're an aggressive team. You talk about them being aggressive with 41% pressure rate on passing downs, getting after quarterbacks in that way to at least get quarterback rushes and hurries and stuff like that. But when you also talk about stripping the football, they're one of the best teams in the game at doing that. So the Eagles will have to be aware of that today.
Well, see, the other thing, too, is, I saw someone on the thread said,
Our comment section?
Yeah, the comment was like, oh, see, blitzing, really doesn't matter all that much. And they're making a reference to the fact that the Giants only have 9 sacks. That's nonsensical, because what blitzing does, blitzing creates pressure.
That's right.
And pressure affects decision-making. And decision-making mistakes means turnovers, okay? Now, these are the types of things that got the Eagles their first loss. Now, I'm not saying they got blitzed and that caused the turnovers. It had three punched-out fumbles and an interception in that game against Washington. But if you're showing Jalen one thing and you're giving him something else, and he's not able to dissect and decipher what you're actually showing him, that could turn into rush passes, passes thrown into coverage rather than reading the coverage properly, bad checks where you're checking from a pass to a run or a run to a pass, and you think you see one thing, but you're really seeing something different. So all of these things, kind of play into it. That's why I always harp on, blitzing. Because if you want to be a high turnover team, in my opinion, you have to apply pressure. And sometimes you can get there with 4, sometimes you need 5, sometimes you need 6, sometimes you got to come with 7, And what Wink Martindale's not going to do is he's not going to sit back and just let the Eagles run up and down the field on him and let him throw it all over the map. He's going to bring pressure because he realizes that if he can create the chaos every once in a while, that maybe they can get off the field on a 3 and out. Maybe they can get off the field on a 3rd down. Maybe they can force, a turnover or get Jalen Hurts to throw an ill-advised pass. These are the things, that worry me when you're playing a team like this against a defensive coordinator that's as creative as this guy is.
Wink is well aware of the fact that because of his depletion of personnel on the defensive side of the football, the only chance he has of being competitive with this Eagles offense is to play games with them, any way, shape, or form. He knows his cornerbacks and his secondary cannot hold up one-on-one against Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown. And he knows that they could take off and run the ball at any given moment. So if he can get them in third and medium range, third and long situations, that's his advantage right there. Now, whether he's successful getting home or forcing Jalen, as Seth just talked about, to make a decision 1 or 2 seconds quicker than he wants to, that remains to be seen. But that's the only way that Giants defense has a chance of being competitive against that Eagles offense.
All right, we talked about Daniel Jones, and I think that's a great point. When you talk about more worried in this particular game due to the circumstances, you're more worried about Daniel Jones beating them on the ground as opposed to Saquon Barkley, which makes sense, again, because of the special circumstances today. But in a way, one of the things that really drove me crazy in last year's matchup against Daniel Jones was that was the first game, one of the first games, that I looked at Jonathan Gannon's scheme, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, and say, I understand that you're not always going to be blitzing. I understand you're not always going to be bringing pressure, bringing heat, and bringing 7-man rushes, whatever it might be. But Daniel Jones is a quarterback that I thoroughly believe you could force into mistakes if you speed up his clock. So I would love to see a little bit of that today. I don't think the Eagles are necessarily going to need that to win. I do believe they are the far superior team today. But if they are going to get off to a great start, I believe they have to start forcing mistakes in this matchup.
Listen, the thing that you fear the most when you bring pressure is how you get beat on the outside. Who are you afraid of? Right. You know, there's no one that you're afraid of. And this is the perfect game to scheme a way to, you know, get the defensive ends up the field, make sure you keep them in the pocket, that you're not getting too high on the upside with both ends. You know you're going to get pushed in the middle, whether you go 4 or 5 man, and you bring an extra 1 or 2 guys to keep them in the pocket. Now, if you keep them in the pocket, you force them to make a bad throw. You force them to throw it away. You force them to hold on to it, you know, and take a sack. Now you got second and third and long situations that bode well for you defensively, you know. But the thing I fear is that, you know, Jonathan Gannon believes that, and listen, I'm not saying that it hasn't worked, but I'm saying how do you take it to another level? How do you take it to the dominant level? How do you put, you know, some more stuff on film for offensive coordinators to have to prepare for, you know, and not just that, how do you affect the game, you know, from a pressure standpoint, the way you really need to. I'm just afraid that, you know, they've had so much success, you know, rushing 4. Last week they got 6 sacks with just rushing 4. So Jonathan's mindset might just be, hey, we don't need to blitz. You know, we don't need to bring pressure. Let's just, you know, do it the way we've been doing it. And then the Giants turn around and keep Saquon and the tight end in. And now you got 7 blocking 4. You don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of getting any pressure that way, you know, but that's his philosophy. Because that's not his scheme.
Not his scheme.
Because he ain't got no scheme.
No,
According to him.
Definitely not the scheme, but more the philosophy. Hey, this is pretty incredible. Philadelphia Eagles are the best team in the NFL. They're sitting there at 11-1. And how about having a top 5 pick still next year in the NFL draft? Well, that could certainly happen with some help from the New Orleans Saints being terrible at football. And you would certainly like the Eagles to help them be terrible at football. And you could be in the stands for that game, courtesy of our friends over there at Ponley Hockey. Here's Tom Giordano to tell you more.
Hey Philly, it's Tom Giordano from Ponley Hockey Giordano. Be sure to follow Ponley Hockey on Instagram for your opportunity to win free Eagles home game tickets for the rest of the season. You heard that right. We're giving away free tickets all season long. And guess what? We're going to give away tickets to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. So make sure you're following us. And as always, thanks for watching the Ponley Hockey postgame show. Go Birds.
Thanks, Tom Giordano. Let's get back to that run game right now and talk about what we could see from Daniel Jones in this particular game. If he does, Gunner, if Jonathan Gannon does decide to go with pressure today, if he does decide to try to force some of those mistakes.
Wait, Jonathan Gannon and pressure? What?
Well, I mean, you got to learn from a mistake or two sometimes, don't you?
He'll have an occasional. He might blitz 10, 11%.
All right. Well, I give him credit for this, but I also give credit to Howie Roseman for going out there and getting guys to occupy the middle of that line of scrimmage, and also getting Jordan Davis back, Dominican Sue. We know the roster and all that. But when it comes to just the philosophy, to use that word yet again, when it comes to the philosophy, do you believe you can learn from a mistake that you made last year and actually improve upon it?
Absolutely. But will he? Now that he has better personnel to play with, we've been sitting here screaming. I've had this argument with a few people during the week. And number one, you cannot argue with the results of this Eagles defense. Leading the league in creating turnovers, run defense. Up there is one of the best in terms of points allowed, passing defense. Statistically across the board, everything you want to have from a defense. But I sit there and I watch games, and in obvious situations where your cornerbacks, especially when you have 2 Pro Bowl caliber cornerbacks, should be coming up and pressing a receiver in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situations, he's got him playing 7, 8 yards off the ball. And it just drives me nuts because basically what has happened more times than not, quarterback throws a quick out, receiver turns, first down. Now, it doesn't lead to a whole lot, but still, get that offense off the field, give the ball back to your offense. It's just little inconsistencies in what I'm watching him in terms of, I can't even use the word scheme. It's a scheme/philosophy, Seth. I don't know. What do you call it? Schemalosophy? What do you call it?
This is what that's what he called it. You know, a reporter asked him, you know, Jonathan, how would you describe your scheme?
Last year,
he says, I don't have a scheme. I have a defensive philosophy. That's the damnedest thing I've ever heard. It's okay we understand what your philosophy is, you know, bend but don't break. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's your philosophy. But everyone has a scheme. You know, let's talk about it. You play some 4-man line, you play some 5-man line, you play some unders, some overs, you know, some odd man fronts, some even man fronts. I mean, you're doing a little bit of everything. Share something with us because we can go look at the film and decipher it. Come on.
Real quick, one thing we've talked about, of course, turnovers, how that could be a problem for the Eagles, how it was a problem going up against the Washington Commanders, how the Eagles can beat themselves. Another way they could beat themselves is penalties, self-inflicted wounds. We talked about those 5 false start penalties. Every member of the offensive line getting a penalty in the first half of the game just last week. How do you get your mind right? How do you get your head right? How do you stay focused when pretty much everybody knows paper-wise you're much better than this football team?
I think they just had a bad week last week. Yeah, and I don't know. I can't explain to you what it is. It seems like there was something off with the cadence with Jalen and the offensive line because you don't have 7 false starts in the first half, you know, without there being some type of anomaly. That being said, you know that they worked it out this week. They got it, you know, where they need to have it. And it might be one of those different situations, at least early in the game, where they're going silent count anyway. You know, until they go up 21-0, then all of a sudden, you know, it gets, you know, hush in there, and now, you know, you can get back, you know, to the verbal stuff. But it's crazy because you never see that at home.
No.
That kind of stuff you see on the road. So something was off, you know, with Jalen and the offensive line last week.
Yeah, something definitely I thought was weird with the cadence.
2 words. We'll rectify that problem today. Jeff Stoutland.
Right.
Jeff Stoutland has been in their behinds all week long. I guarantee you they won't have the mental miscues that they had a week ago. Now, you may have an abundance of penalties based on the intensity of this divisional rivalry. Players are going to step outside of character. Little extra shots are going to be taken. And what do you do as a player? You retaliate. And who gets caught usually? The guy who throws the second shot, not the first shot. I can see them having penalties on both sides based on the intensity of this rivalry. But in terms of just mental mishaps, I guarantee you, Jeff Stoutland's got these boys ready today.
A lot of this at Stoutland University. See me after class.
What if you throw the second and third shot?
You're going to get caught for the second and third shot. If I throw the first shot under your rib cage and I get your attention, by the time you throw that second shot, what happens? Referee's already looking around, right?
Yeah, you know, I never got any of those. I was a master of retaliation. There's a lot of things that go on in the pile, underneath the pile that everybody can't see.
Yes.
All right. You don't start nothing. I'll get you sooner or later.
and you know a lot of that is going to happen today.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
Because of the magnitude of this game. Oh my goodness.
Certainly. All right, it's prediction time. John McMullen already chimed in with his 31-18 score from MetLife Stadium, courtesy of our great friends over there at Thrive. Gunnar, I'll start with you. What are you expecting for Eagles-Giants this afternoon?
I do believe there was some gamesmanship on Brian Daboll's part in terms of whether or not Saquon was going to play in this game. They understand that they need this game. This is a Giants team that's reeling right now. Last 5 games haven't been anywhere near as close for them, or the results have not been what they want to compare to what they were leading up to that tailspin. But the Giants just don't have the personnel to stay in this game long. I think it'll be an entertaining game. They don't have wide receivers. They beat up on defense. Saquon is a focal point. Daniel Jones is not going to rush for 4 touchdowns on this defense. So with that said, I look for the Eagles to win this game 34-17.
34-17.
Yeah.
Seth, what do you got?
You know, I set a prediction on my show this week, early in the week, and you know, and it was based upon, you know, Saquon being healthy, all things being equal, looking at how many yards per game, the Giants were averaging, I think the Eagles, stay on the trajectory that they're on. I said 32, the 20, but then I started looking at, how beat up the Giants are, and the probability moving forward that Saquon it might not play as much as as everyone thought. So my adjustment is 32-14. The Eagles come out with the victory.
All right, that's a great one right there. I'm right in the same ballpark as you gentlemen, as a matter of fact. I got a 31-13 in favor of the Philadelphia Eagles, taking care of business today against the New York Giants. We appreciate you guys taking care of us today, watching the program. And of course, one more reminder, Fancy Brigade finale, New Year's night, 6abc.com. Don't forget about it. And, of course, the Mummers Row Philly tea. For John McMullen, who'll be along with us again at the halftime show along with Devin Caney. I'll be joining them as well for halftime on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel at 6abc.com. Mike Missinelli will be along for postgame with these fine gentlemen as well. Until then, go Birds.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech, we offer 3 major services. The first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
My husband hadn't missed work in 15 years. His injury required months of rehabilitation, and unfortunately, the insurance company didn't see it that way. I was working 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough. One conversation with Pond Lehocky changed everything. We sat down, told him our story, and they guided us through the whole workers' compensation legal process.
Pond Lehocky. Tell us your story.
Game show with Seth Joyner.
I knew that they had a running game.
Derek Gunn.
He has put in the effort.
Devin Caney.
Had we not won the Super Bowl, what would we be saying?
And Mike Missinelli.
Well, you know who Philly is.
Post game, now streaming on the 6ABC family of apps.
Celebrating the life of your loved one is what we do at Life Celebrations by Givenish. When the matriarch of the Dalloway family died suddenly at 82 years old, Life Celebrations by Givenish stepped in.
They will make this the easiest thing that I know it's not easy, but they will make this as easy as possible.
Life Celebrations by Givenish, customizing services as unique as the individual.
I just know that my dad, who is in charge of everything, was not in charge of anything at that point when my mom passed. And again, just another shout out to this place for making it easy.
Turning tragedy into a celebration of life, no matter how hard, is what we do at Life Celebrations by Givenish. Life Celebrations by Givenish, customizing services as unique as the individual.
Go for the beers, go for the cheers, go for the hit and the hits, go for the scene, go for the screens, go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean.
Continue your communication sciences and disorders education at Salus University within the Doctor of Audiology or Masters of Science in Speech-Language Pathology programs. With state-of-the-art labs, on-campus clinics, and extensive externship opportunities, students position themselves to be at the top of the job market. Stand out in the audiology and speech-language pathology profession by visiting salus.edu.